Good morning. I'm Darrell West, Vice President of Governance Studies and Director of the Center for Technology Innovation here at the Brookings Institution. And I would like to welcome you to this forum on sustainability, smart cities, and the Internet of Things. And we are archiving the video that we're producing today. We're live webcasting this right now, but any of you who have friends and colleagues who were unable to attend this or to watch our webcast, they can go to the Brookings website at brookings.edu and watch the video at any point later. We also have set up a Twitter feed at #SmartCities, so any of you who wish to post comments during the forum, feel free to do so. So we live in an age of rapid technological change. Institutions around the world are envisioning a future where technology enhances resource management and increases environmental sustainability. By using real-time data analytics and providing consumers with up-to-date information, it is possible to create truly sustainable urban environments. This week, we put out a paper on ways to achieve sustainability in a 5G world. And through advanced networks and new sensors, we can mitigate some of the environmental problems in terms of air and water quality. For example, the City of London has set up over 100 air quality monitoring stations as part of its air quality network. These readings are sent to the cloud for use in regulation and enforcement. Here in the United States, San Jose is a city that's doing the same thing in terms of tracking chemical contamination. It uses sensors to look for various chemical traces in different locations and report when they reach dangerous levels. So I think these and other types of technologies that we talk about in the paper can be very helpful in terms of resource management. They're innovative solutions for energy efficiency, building design, and traffic management. Effective building design helps in terms of lighting, heating, and electrical systems. People can remotely raise or lower their thermostats. We can use sensors to create dynamic as opposed to static processes for controlling our environment. In conference rooms, sensors can detect how many people are in that room and adjust the temperature in light of those numbers. In the paper, in addition to outlining a number of examples of what we think are innovative uses of technology to improve sustainability, we also make a number of recommendations for other areas to improve what they're doing. For example, one area is just improving the procurement process, using procurement to achieve greater impact. Through purchasing power, cities can make their suppliers practice healthy sustainability. So it's a way that they can promote practices on a much broader area beyond their own particular jurisdictions. It's also possible to integrate energy saving systems into building designs. It's important for buildings to have energy certificates that are publicly available and publicly visible in lobbies that commit to energy conservation and talk about how that particular building is trying to promote sustainability. It is important in the coming 5G world to improve interoperability so that all these new devices, sensors, and monitoring systems can communicate with one another, that we can share this information through open platforms, because that gives researchers tools with which to come up with the best possible solutions. And of course, we need to take security seriously, because these devices are growing in numbers and are expected to reach into the billions, so that intruders cannot hack into people's home systems or energy grids. So we need to kind of think about ways to promote innovation, maintain security, and find ways to use technology to protect the environment. To help us understand these issues, we have invited several distinguished experts to give their particular perspectives. Our first speaker is Bridget Carlin. She is the Managing Director of IoT Strategy and Technology for Intel. In that position, she is responsible for managing the IoT commercialization and product strategy across the company's various divisions. This includes the development of strategic business objectives and defining new business models for IoT solutions. Previously, she held several management positions and was co-founder of Think Systems, a pioneer in mobile software development that has been deployed in 43 different countries. I also want to note that we appreciate the financial support that Intel has provided for this event. It helps make possible the work that our independent scholars undertake. So with that, I will welcome Bridget to the podium.
Good morning. Thank you, Daryl, for that kind introduction. I'm thrilled to be here today representing Intel Corporation and honored to be participating in this event. Sustainability is one of the defining issues of our time. Meeting the demands of living in a sustainable and environmentally responsible way is increasingly important among people, corporations, and governments around the world. As a technology provider, Intel is privileged to have the opportunity to support the Brookings Institution in its examination of the impact the new technologies will have on our society. We are in a very exciting time of innovation, a new era of technology where data is becoming ubiquitous, and the proliferation of that data is enabling new insights and new experiences. This is the era of ubiquitous intelligence, and it's being driven by the Internet of Things, where we are connecting everyday objects, sharing data, and extracting meaningful and valuable insights. And it's changing the way we work and live. There are few moments in history when something as impactful as IoT happens. It's as significant a moment as was the written word. It changed everything: how we socialized, how we learned, how we lived, how we grew. Now with IoT and the advancements in mobile, cloud, and information technologies, we have an equally stunning opportunity and ability to collect data from almost everything, analyze it, and make a positive impact to the human experience. We're on the cusp of seeing all parts of life connected, where everything and everyone have the potential to be integrated and networked into a global network society. That will enable us to increase efficiency and decrease waste. A smart and connected network of IoT applications that will provide unprecedented value. Along with IoT, the evolution to a 5G network is a fundamental shift from its predecessor communications networks. 5G is where mobility and computing are going to converge and become indistinguishable. 5G will not only increase speed and capacity, it will infuse intelligence throughout the network to enable devices to communicate more efficiently, transport data and content more quickly and securely, and enable sharing of compute resources. As part of this foundational transformation, the Internet of Things and 5G are going to fuel innovation in nearly every part of our lives. Things that were never connected before are going to lead the way to new services and new applications, providing new insights that will materially and meaningfully impact our lives for the better. Imagine entire fleets of self-driving vehicles traveling down our accident-free streets and highways. The connected intelligence within these vehicles will allow us to reduce our CO2 footprint by controlling the emissions from driving at optimum speeds and by following optimized routes. Think about our industries that are manufacturing products and services tailor-made to what we like and accessible to us and delivered to us wherever we may be at the moment we want them. Smart, intuitive, seamlessly connected processes will help manufacturers be more efficient and enjoy growth because they will be making the right products that have been predicted by analyzing customer preferences. And they will keep customers happy and loyal by offering better value and providing immediate access or delivery. Imagine farmers increasing their crop yield and accelerating time from seed to table through precision agriculture. Whether it's by using smart irrigation for real-time monitoring of water levels to maximize a crop yield, or by using driverless tractors to save labor costs, or by using drones to spot pest infestations early and spray just the targeted infected area. So why is this important? In our world of more than 7 billion people, we are facing significant sustainability challenges. Let's consider water. There is projected to be a 40% gap between supply and demand for water across the world by 2030. and our food. With almost 10 billion people expected to be on the planet by 2040, we will require 70% more food. Energy. With the continued growth of our economies worldwide, energy consumption will increase 56%. And what's the impact to our environment? Well, with the growing economies, they will be producing more waste, and that will result in a 46% increase in CO2 by 2040. So these global social and economic challenges impact all of us. And by connecting things and converting vast amounts of data into meaningful and actionable intelligence, we will now have the ability to address environmental, health, and infrastructure challenges. Of course, as Daryl mentioned, we can't have a discussion about IoT and 5G without discussing security and data privacy. In fact, security is the cornerstone for the successful adoption and scale of IoT and 5G. With an ever-evolving threat landscape and an increased awareness of data privacy, Intel believes we need to prioritize security as the foundation of IoT solutions and the 5G ecosystem. In fact, Intel specifies that security be integrated at the onset in both the hardware and in the software, so that from the device to the network to the cloud and all points in between, comprehensive security is protecting our globally networked society. This technical work is already underway. 5G standards are being defined and prototypes are under development that will determine what IoT is going to look like as we enter an era where we will have billions of connected devices and sensors that will be generating vast amounts of data. But you may wonder, do we have any evidence that this is happening? Or is this just a lot of hype? Well, the analysts are telling us that today, in 2016, there are 5.5 million devices connecting to the internet every day. And we're spending $2.5 million on IoT hardware every minute. So yes, this is reality. Additionally, analysts estimate that 50 billion devices will be connected to the internet by 2020, plus 212 billion connected sensors. And together, they will be generating 44 zettabytes of data. So this is a very big evolutionary area of growth. Together, these IoT connected things are projected to generate a global economic impact of $4 trillion to $11 trillion per year by 2025, with nearly $6 trillion being spent on related IoT solutions over the next 5 years. But remember, a thing is only a thing until it gets connected, and it only becomes valuable when you can share data and analyze it for actionable intelligence. Things like parking meters, digital signs, buildings, streetlights, and cars. These things will be connected and have capability well beyond the single use they were created for. These smart and connected things is how the IoT with 5G is going to not only change our personal experiences, but will also revolutionize industries by generating new sources of data that feed machine learning algorithms, streamlining the path to actionable insights, and enabling real-time decision-making. Industries will begin to transform. Industries such as agriculture, automotive, healthcare, manufacturing, energy, transportation and logistics, financial services, insurance, and more. And as we consider the possibilities with this new era of technology innovation, I want to take a moment and focus on the opportunity we have to address the significant sustainability challenges that face the planet. Let's look at just one example: smart transportation and the impact on our cities. With smart transportation, cars that are equipped with 5G will be intelligent, highly automated mobile devices that are linked with other cars, other devices, and other systems, forming an adaptive, intuitive, real-time environment from home to vehicle to office. Passengers will spend their riding time more productively with in-vehicle advanced communications and collaboration services, all with greater safety while on the road. Our communities will have smart public transportation services that will help reduce carbon footprints and enable more efficient resource use, which will eliminate traffic and reduce air and water pollution. 5G and IoT will also enable the vast amounts of data being generated in this smart transportation ecosystem to be aggregated, analyzed, and turned into broader actionable intelligence. For example, vehicle data can be used for everything from eliminating the idle time for passengers to optimizing delivery routes to preventing vehicle-to-vehicle collisions to securing vehicles based on biometrics, all while minimizing the impact on the environment. People and packages will be delivered safer and faster, and the ride will be more enjoyable. And what does this mean for our cities? It's going to have a positive impact, both on the infrastructures and the economies of our cities. Today, cities consume 2/3 of the world's energy and are responsible for 80% of the carbon impact, and these numbers are increasing every day. Looking ahead, by 2030, we will have a population of 8.5 billion people on the planet. 5 billion people of them will be living in urban areas. That's 60% of the population living downtown and putting even greater demand on city resources. But with IoT and 5G enabling more connected and automated vehicles on our roads, the system and sensors on a car are going to be able to interact and communicate with the sensing systems within the city, such as with sensors on buildings, traffic signals, streetlights, and more. With smart transportation, the analytics capability enabled by a 5G network will not only provide information about an individual car, but about all the cars in the city and their surroundings. This real-time 5G vehicle-to-vehicle and vehicle-to-infrastructure communication will allow city infrastructure to be responsive. It will be able to do things like dynamically adjust traffic lights, reroute navigation, all in real time. That will optimize traffic flow as well as vehicle-to-vehicle safety communications that will save lives. Let's take a closer look as to why this is important. Last year, more than 30,000 people died in the U.S. from preventable car accidents. 90% of those accidents were caused by human error. The estimated cost of vehicle accidents worldwide is about $870 billion per year. And in the U.S. last year, it's estimated that travel delays due to traffic congestion wasted more than 3 billion gallons of fuel, nearly 7 billion hours of wasted time, and nearly $160 billion. So, as we evolve to a highly automated driving environment in the U.S., analysts estimate that we will see social and economic benefits by 2030. They predict $1.3 trillion in annual savings, which includes $507 billion in productivity gains, $488 billion in accident cost reductions, and $138 billion in productivity savings from reduced traffic congestion. But it doesn't end there. This capability isn't limited to smart transportation. We also see this intelligent real-time capability in all of the assets within a city. A single piece of equipment or a building will be equipped to monitor and regulate resources within a room, within a building, a block of buildings, or in a neighborhood. And we're already starting to see the beginnings of this today. Daryl mentioned London, San Jose. We see it in New York, in Dubai, in Chicago, Portland. Many of the cities around the world are starting to embrace and understand what basically equipping the city with intelligence is going to do for them and the benefits it will realize. Of course, the size and scope of this opportunity is a far greater challenge than any single company, city, or government agency can address. Our collaboration is required. As a technology provider, Intel is working to build a diverse coalition of public-private partnerships engaging with government agencies, academia, and industry partners. All of us are working on the solutions. We're defining common standards and protocols. We're designing open platforms. We're creating test beds to ensure interoperability. And we're integrating security at the onset to ensure that these innovations will operate reliably, securely, and will scale. We're on the precipice of a transformational age driven by technology. With IoT and 5G, we are truly revolutionizing how we work and live. We're in a time when technology is valued not just for the devices it produces, but for the problems it can solve and the experiences it makes possible. In fact, I believe the opportunity to address and solve global sustainability challenges has never been greater. These new technologies are the keys to our success. So I'd like to thank Brookings once again for recognizing the importance of sustainability challenges we face and doing the hard work of examining the technological solutions that will aid in transforming the way we use our precious resources, deliver services, and create healthy and productive communities. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we are delighted to have several other experts here with us as well to help our discussion about smart cities and sustainability. John Garrity is the Senior Connectivity Advisor for the Global Development Lab at USAID. In that position, John drives the agency's operations on extending internet access and adoption through policy engagement and program management. And this includes identifying and shaping policy and regulatory reforms with respect to broadband expansion and developing public-private partnerships. Suk-Woo Ri is Associate Director of Cyber Physical Systems for the National Institute of Standards and Technology. He is leading that group's Global City Teams Challenge, which aims to create a replicable and scalable model for the deployment of IoT solutions in smart cities around the world. Previously, he served as a Presidential Innovation Fellow through the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. Tim Fleming is the Director of Enterprise Sustainability for AT&T. In that role, he works with businesses and governments to look at how they can use technology to optimize resource use and improve environmental performance. So he combines expertise both in environmental sustainability and IoT technologies and smart city efforts to drive value both for customers and society. And I also want to thank AT&T for its support for our program that helps our scholars do their work as well. So I want to start with John and your work at USAID. I know you've been trying to expand digital access and improve sustainability. Could you describe the initiatives that you have underway?
Yep, absolutely. And thank you very much, Daryl, and thank you to Brookings for this invitation to participate on this important topic in this panel. Let me qualify by saying that I'm actually quite new to USAID, right? So I joined USAID this past summer in August, and prior to that I was at Cisco for 10 years. Really working on broadband policy. With regard to the initiatives that we're working on, particularly around internet access, our focus is really on increasing digital inclusion. And so we have initiatives that focus both on extending internet connectivity on the supply side, as well as on the demand side issue of internet access. So issues such as digital literacy, closing the digital gender gap, how to increase the use of local content and relevant services. That's all on the digital access side. I think also what might be useful is to talk a little bit about the Internet of Things and how the Internet of Things really plays a role in the context of international development. And so this is something that we've been looking at, particularly because I sit in the Global Development Lab, which is the innovation arm of the Agency for International Development. With regard to the IoT and how it plays a role in sustainability, particularly in development, I think that there's three main things that we should take into account. The first is that this story of the impact and the potential impact of the Internet of Things, it's not just a story for advanced economies and industrial sectors. You know, some of the research that Bridget cited really points to this potential impact. And so when we were at Cisco, one of the things that we said back in 2013 was that the Internet of Things is going to potentially have an impact of around $19 trillion over a 10-year period. And we thought, wow, this is a really big number, until McKinsey came out with an even larger study, which is what Bridget referenced. So what we did earlier in this year is we actually said, you know, the focus of all of the literature out there on the impact of the IoT is really on advanced economies and industrial sectors, but there's another story here. There's potential impact right now on how the IoT can make a difference in middle and low-income countries, particularly in marginalized communities at the base of the pyramid. So that's a big story. Second quick story is around the fact that we see a growing digital divide in the adoption of the Internet of Things. If you think about some of the major adoption digital divides around internet adoption or mobile telephony, those are closing at the global level between advanced economies and developing economies. But in terms of the Internet of Things, that digital divide is actually current, it's there, and the growth rates are such that that digital divide is actually expanding. So that's a big issue that concerns us. And the third main story that I'd like to share, just for opening remarks, is really around, okay, so what exactly are the interventions, the Internet of Things interventions that are making a difference? So earlier this year, we launched a report with Cisco and the UN International Telecommunications Union, where we mapped all of the current IoT interventions that are impacting the Sustainable Development Goals. And at USAID, for example, we have interventions that are using water flow sensors that are helping to improve the delivery of water in rural villages where over 1 million village hand pumps are in service today across sub-Saharan Africa, and at any given moment, about 1/3 of those are down. But with water sensors, you can monitor more efficiently and immediately dispatch and improve the uptime of those sensors. We're doing the same thing with water boreholes, with remote sensing for Ebola patients in the post-Ebola response and recovery, and a whole host of other things around natural resource management, resiliency of communities, and also in humanitarian assistance. So those are some of the use cases that we can discuss in detail.
Okay, thank you very much. And John was mentioning the use of sensors in the water supply. I mean, this is an area where when you think about the problem that we saw in Flint, Michigan, and the high lead levels, you know, there are sensors now that can detect lead levels. And so as opposed to kind of waiting for problems to develop, people get sick, people dying, you know, we can use the technologies on a proactive basis to anticipate problems and deal with them before they reach the level that we saw in Flint. So, Sukwu, how quickly will the Internet of Things take off? So Bridget was saying there is a lot of hype in this area. There are heightened expectations about what's going to take place. How do you see things developing, and then what are the barriers to its development?
So that's actually a $1 million question. Well, I'll say $1 billion question. How fast is going to take off? Let's look at the history of IoT first. IoT is not something completely new. It's been there for last decades, multiple decades. Especially for the last 20 years, a lot of investment has gone into developing new technologies, essentially network protocols and new sensors and low-cost devices, things like that. At that time, what we all missed was, why are we developing these? I mean, what is going to be the actual benefit, impact? So for the last 20 years, we developed so many things that now enables us to start thinking about what kind of services we can provide. What is a real action that we can take from it? So it is important to know that IoT, or Internet of Things, is not a single industry. It's a concept. It's an enabler. You apply this concept to existing industries, and you create a new industry. It's like an industrial revolution. Hundreds of years ago, or even 50 years ago, when it came up with the internet, that what it did was it created a new way to do businesses, a new way to address the issues where communication and email came in instead of just phone calls. That's what IoT is going to do. Now, what I'm optimistic about is that now, 20 years ago, 10 years, when I talked to people about IoT, we didn't call it IoT at that time, we called it something else. They were all talking about sensors. They were all talking about the network protocols. Today, if I talk about IoT, probably about 70% of my conversation about, okay, what is the actual benefit that we can get? What is the business model? What is the business case? What is the action that we can make our lives better? This is a significant shift of the discussion. It's a timely, and that's necessary. Issue with IoT, barrier is really fragmentation, meaning that everybody developed their own thing. I work for NIST, which we do standards, and we have funny things we say. In IoT, everybody IoT is like a toothbrush. So like everybody wants to have one, but nobody wants to use anybody else's. So it's like a standard in IoT. It's like everybody wants to create their own, which is hindering the progress. So what you have to look at is how we can replicate the success, not isolated success. Come up with a system that can be replicated and scaled instead of going custom production, custom design one by one. It applies to not just IoT in general, applies to smart cities that we're talking about. A lot of companies are working on it, like AT&T over here is a great partner of the program I'm running at NIST. They work on the frameworks, they work on these replicability issues. I'm sure he's going to talk about it. So at NIST, what we are trying to do is create more of an encouragement and create a platform, not a technical platform, but like convening that these cities, industry, and university can all come together and create something that is replicable to many cities, not just two. There are 19,000 cities, towns, and communities in the U.S. only, all right? Out of that, there are only a small portion of those cities can afford to spend millions and millions of dollars upfront. We have to reduce the barrier of entry to spread this technology and to get the technology to benefit to be spread to small towns and rural areas. So to do that, we need to really create economies of scale. That's the point that I'm trying to make in my 5 minutes.
Okay, now that's a perfect lead in to Tim, who's spent a lot of time working on smart cities. So what do you view as the most promising approaches in the smart cities area, particularly as it relates to sustainability?
Yeah, thank you for having me today. It's a great part. It was great to be part of the conversation. It's really important that we see Internet of Things and these technologies is really having a positive impact on the environment and society in general. When we're talking to city officials and we look at solutions and we're talking about use cases and all this technology and the problems we're trying to address for cities, specifically as it relates to carbon and environmental pressures, the first topics come around energy, the sort of the domains, if you will. How do we attack the energy problem? Because energy is related to carbon emissions and greenhouse gases and other pollutants. Transportation is a natural one, and water. You mentioned water before, but water, as it relates to quality, but also conservation, efficiency, and it actually has a significant impact on carbon. But let me go back and talk about energy. Usually the first starting point, it's not unlike if you're trying to make something more efficient. If you start with a building, for example, what's the first thing you do? You probably swap out the light bulbs and put in LEDs, right? Same thing for a city and a lamppost. Okay, we're going to swap out we're going to touch the lamppost. We're going to go out and put an LED in, and you can actually achieve, say, 40 to 70% sometimes energy efficiencies by putting in LEDs. But if you're already touching the pole and you connect that pole and you make the lighting fixture intelligent by doing so, you can actually up those efficiencies and reduce the energy consumption by up to 90, 95%. Well, how do you do that? Well, you're controlling it. Think about just like a dimmer, right? I don't have to deliver full lumens, even from an LED, for a constant cycle, right? Depending on the use of the space, if I'm aware of how that space is being used, whether it be in a building or it's vehicular or pedestrian traffic on a street, that may inform whether I need to have that light on at all. So there are tremendous efficiencies to be gained there. And as Hoku was mentioning, that we have to make the business cases for this. So it's a great place to start, because it's kind of an easy, one of the first sort of starts as the platform you establish there, but it can help, it's got great ROI, and then you can start bringing in other solutions that you can hang off that connected lamppost. So now I have a connected lamppost, I've got an LED, I've got a smart light in that post, so I can start putting air quality sensors on the lamppost. I can put more motion sensors on there. I can put in video cameras to help actually with smart street parking solutions and the like. So that's usually one of the first places we look, and smart grid being another part of the energy package as well. But transportation is the natural one. I attend a lot of conferences and talk to a lot of people. As we talk to city officials, transportation and traffic is a prominent pain point, right? And that's something it's all visceral for us. We deal with traffic, either as a citizen, an individual, or from a commercial perspective. The numbers are out there. About 26% of GHG emissions resulting from transportation in general, be it a movement of people or goods through a city or through a system. I was flying in last night, and it was beautiful. The lights are on the Capitol building and throughout the city, and Christmas time's coming up, and I see this long row of white lights next to a long row of red lights, and it's just cars stuck on the highways and in cities. I thought it was really beautiful, but the people in those cars probably don't think it's so great, right? Now, as a commuter myself, and I take mass transit, but there's so much environmental benefit to be gained from addressing that problem, and Bridget mentioned some of this. As we have data insights into actually how the people, goods move throughout the city, ingress and egress points, what do we do now? We have to do some 5-10-year study about movement of the city and the urbanization factors and all the people moving to the city, and let's hopefully predict how we can change our built environment and retrofit that into a new model. It's incredibly inefficient. All that infrastructure and the cost of rebuilding and the infrastructure that you already have in place. As I understand, there's some issues going on with the metro system here in the D.C. area. So for those of you
You
that
don't
are
even want to get into
I'm
that.
sorry. I have that stricken from the record, sorry. But it's not, it's persistent. Every city you go to, I live in Texas, I live in Dallas, and we have 7 million people in the metro area. 25% of the population in Texas lives in the Dallas area. And it's not it's not just a local city problem, it's a regional problem, it's a state problem. Austin's population has doubled in the past 10 years. How do you deal with those pressures? Well, it starts with putting sensor technology in place and actually getting some real data, some real insights, some real visibility into those systems. And we can talk use cases all day, but parking is a real part of it. Just from a personal perspective, I get in a car, or I get on my train, or I want to know when my train really is going to be there. Or the car is full. Is there a parking space? Where's the parking space going to be? All of that, if the story of IoT for me and from an environmental sustainability perspective is a story of efficiency. It's about removing waste from a system. There's tremendous amounts of waste in all of these systems that the IoT, the promise of the IoT, and what we're seeing already in the early tests is that we're getting this visibility into these systems that we can start creating more efficient systems, improving those systems, even in a retrofit-built environment. And I'm going to add one more thing, because I mentioned water, and water, water on itself obviously is a precious resource, but it also has a tremendous carbon impact because water and energy are intrinsically aligned. It takes roughly 25 gallons to generate a kilowatt hour of electricity. We also use 25% of our electricity just moving or treating water, moving it around. And 30% of that water doesn't even make it to its destination because of our aging infrastructure, leaks and the like. So acoustic leak detection, efficient water meters that we can actually have visibility into these systems. It's a very exciting time to be at this convergence of technology and sustainability.
And that's a great point about parking. We just had an illustration of that yesterday. We had a visitor who was coming to have lunch with us, and before coming, he asked Siri what was the best way to get from downtown DC to Brookings, bus, metro, or car. And Siri said, oh, you should drive a car. So he came here. It's a 10-minute drive. He was very happy, but he ignored the parking angle, and it took him 10 minutes to find the parking place,
Right.
And so he was 10 minutes late for the lunch. But I want to pose a question for everybody on the panel, and then after that, we'll open the floor to any questions or comments from the audience. We've heard, you've already mentioned several barriers. Sukwu, you mentioned the issue of fragmentation and the need for standards. We can envision organizational barriers, technology, and especially interoperability barriers, perhaps policy barriers. What do each of you see as the best ways to overcome whatever barrier you think is important so that we can accelerate the adoption of smart cities and the Internet of Things? And Sukwu, we'll start with you.
Can I start? Yeah, so that's actually another excellent question.
Thank you.
You're doing a great job. So at the end of the day, my answer to that question is pretty simple. It's collaboration. And it's kind of a cliche. Everybody talks about collaboration. But the collaboration I'm talking about is collaboration with very specific goals. Industry brings in certain perspectives, and end users like cities bring in their own perspectives. Academic institutions are bringing their own perspective, and nonprofits bring their perspective. To really come up with a consensus, we all have to come up with more of a agreed upon blueprint, that's what I call it, for transportation and public safety and all these things that can be replicable and applicable. So now, when I say consensus, that's not exactly a written down standard. We want to get there, but even before that, we are talking about what is a kind of concept? I mean, what is kind of a high-level block diagram of these different pieces can work together? That's a starting point, I will say.
Okay. John, barriers and ways to overcome them.
Well, so in our context, we're really focused on alleviating extreme poverty and the role that the Internet of Things, and particularly connected sensors, there's another aspect, there's actuators, but particularly connected sensors, really helps to improve project management and service delivery because of real-time data. So we can improve service delivery, we can improve monitoring and evaluation, we can improve research, and then also improve policy. The challenge that we see, and it's still very early days in the application of IoT in international development work, but the challenge that we see is that right now the ecosystem is at a very young stage. There aren't a lot of off-the-shelf solutions that can immediately be deployed in the context that we work. There's a whole range of other issues, connectivity, cost, capacity. But in terms of what we can do as a community. I think the more that we can drive the ecosystem forward, the more partners that actually get involved in creating both the products, the services, capacity building, the standards. Standards is a huge issue. The better off we are. And so my call to action for folks who are interested in this topic, particularly as it relates to our mission around alleviating extreme poverty, is to be engaged in some way, shape, or form. We have a community of practice that we've set up. We have colleagues that are focusing on this with regard to the Feed the Future program and how to improve food security. We have folks that are doing this with regard to our water and sanitation projects. So my ask would be to get engaged no matter what angle or where you sit in the conversation.
Tim, your thoughts on ways to overcome barriers?
Sure. And one of the barriers we see as we go city by city and we talk to city leaders and city officials is just the organizational silos that sit within these cities and their procurement processes that are fairly outdated and not really equipped to handle the type of solution that they're trying to purchase or deploy here. We have one city we work with, you go on their website and there are 71 different departments. That's a city. It's not even the federal government. It's just 71 different departments for a city. And each of those departments may have their own procurement process. Each one of them may have their own IT systems. They may have their own decision makers. They may have, if I want to go do something in a city and actually, I have to trench something, I want to connect, I touch the pole, I need electricity, I need to do all these things. I need all of those folks to the table. But before I even get to the technology conversation, have you identified as a city what you're trying to achieve from an environmental perspective, from a citizen benefit and well-being? What are your issues? What are your challenges? Let's not just go out and buy a bunch of technology. That doesn't really serve anyone well. It's a very short-term, short-sighted way of looking at it. So you have to bring all the organizational folks together to have a sort of holistic view. One of the Sustainable Development Goals is partnership and collaboration, number 17. That's an important one. And that's why AT&T's approach, along with Intel and some other players in the space, is we all come to the table together. We have the strategic alliance is what we call it, and we all go to the city together and we say, hey, we have all of this together. You don't have to work with each one. We don't have to respond to an RFP individually. We can all do this together. And then I'll just point to the great work that NIST and other public-private partnerships are doing. When you bring in, you start forming these coalitions of the public sector, the private sector, and it really helps with breaking down those barriers and getting some of these solutions deployed.
I just want to piggyback just one more short thing. The unique thing about this IoT is that not a single company or not even a single technology can solve the problem. You need to bring the whole thing from top to bottom, and I don't think there's any company in the world that can bring the whole thing by itself. That's where the collaboration is important. I mean, there are some stacks and layers that companies like AT&T or Intel and Microsoft and all this, all these different companies, Verizon, of course, including Qualcomm. Those kind of companies can have their own sectors they can serve. The trick is you have to combine them all, and you have to also bring academic institutions who can provide fresh inputs from the new technologies, and most importantly, you gotta work with the cities. I'm talking about smart cities in this specific example. Cities are all unique in certain sense, but doesn't mean that the solutions to address their problems are all unique. Most of the big cities in the world have some kind of traffic congestion problem, okay? Most of the big cities have some kind of air pollution problem. So point is, let's identify those problems that is shared by many cities. Let's figure out what is the solutions that all these different companies and universities can bring in. What is the best practice that can be replicable in, let's say, majority of the cities that are suffering from the same problem? That's how you scale things up. That's, just wanted to supplement that.
Okay, good point. Let's bring in the audience. There's a gentleman right here on the aisle who has a question. So if you can just give us your name and organization.
Paul Anirban, independent consultant. So this question is from the perspective of reducing alienation, if you will, in both former blue-collar communities as well as inner-city areas. From the metric of employment growth, how can 5G IoT be used for employment growth in a concentrated way rather than the aggregate GDP growth? And part B of that specifically is any thoughts on the existing empowerment zones, enterprise zone legislation to modify that to achieve that objective?
Any of you want to address that?
Everybody don't raise your hand at once. Start with the easy questions, right? Well, I just, what I hear city officials talk about, especially as it comes to, I'm not sure I'm going to answer your question the right way, the way you want me to answer it, but, with 5G, the emergence of IoT, we honestly don't even know what all the possibilities are as far as use cases go. We know that there's going to be a dynamic shift, a dramatic shift across industry, and specifically within smart cities. I know there is an eye from the leadership in multiple cities. They look at how the highways were built and how they basically just sectioned off parts of neighborhoods. In Dallas alone, I'll go back to Dallas as my hometown, so I keep referring to Dallas. But 60% of the land area in Dallas is only represents 15% of the actual tax base, right? So they are trying to address that issue with these solutions, and maybe that is just, again, go back to transportation, getting people to where they need to be to do the jobs. And including them in the new use cases and the new sort of industries that are cottage industries that'll pop up out of this. But I can tell you that just in the conversations with city leaders, they are very cognizant of it and how can we apply these solutions. We don't exactly know how we're going to do that yet, but it's definitely top of mind.
Okay, right here, this gentleman here on the aisle.
Can you talk about the downside of a fully developed Internet of Things world?
Nobody wants to answer anything.
Let me piggyback off of the first question as well. So in our contexts, what we're trying to do is we're trying to improve service delivery, whether it's in a healthcare program, whether it's an agricultural program. And so we tend to use connected sensors not only to improve the service delivery, but also on the M&E end, right, on the monitoring and evaluation end. Usually when monitoring and evaluation is done, a lot of times in our context, is a project is implemented, and then there's sort of survey research that's done afterwards to see how that implementation went. What we're finding with the use of sensors that's embedded, so let's just take an example, clean cook stoves. Right? In the clean cook stoves programs that have been run out of the State Department and other donor agencies, clean cook stoves are provided to household dwellings, and that's supposed to be used instead of open carbon cooking. With the use of connected sensors, what you're able to do is you're able to monitor in real time whether or not those cook stoves are being used, as opposed to after a one-year intervention, you come in and ask, oh, did you use that clean cook stove every day? How often? For how long? What we're finding, and this goes back to the labor point, is that the use of sensors doesn't replace the in-person, the human interaction with the survey itself, because there's different biases with those different approaches. There's recall bias when people are responding to surveys. There's reactivity bias. When people see sensors, well, they actually begin to use them because they were told and they're reminded. So what we're seeing in our work is the complementarity of both a sensor in an IoT environment with the existing human activity, the human element. So that doesn't necessarily speak to economic empowerment zones, but it demonstrates to us that we can't just substitute the M&E work immediately with a sensor. I mean, there's a lot more work that needs to be done on that side.
And a quick footnote that I would add to that, the downside that people worry about are loss of privacy and lack of security. So those are things, we need to work on each of those areas. This gentleman here on the aisle has a question.
Good morning, Ari Gerstmann from the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research. I found it curious in your conversations about environmental observations that you talked mostly from the perspective of monitoring and enforcement and not from the opportunity to assimilate those observations into modeling and provide better forecasts around air quality, weather, and water. And so I'm hoping that you could talk a little bit about the downstream and what happens with all of this data. And not just for, okay, now we know more, but then what can we then do with that data in terms of modeling, prediction, and forecasting?
Good question.
I can take that question. That's actually a very important question. NIST is fundamentally a technology organization. So we look at the smart city IoT issues from technology perspective. Of course, we also look at from market perspective. Now, going to that question, the modeling and simulation or prediction in some cases is an extremely important factor in smart cities. Here's why. If you go to the mayor's office and say, here's a product that's going to improve your traffic congestion problem, you could do better. The first question they're going to ask is, how much is going to cost? Secondly, okay, so once I spend that money, what's going to change, all right? And then what's going to change is not, they need an answer that not like, oh, it's going to get better. That's not the answer they're looking for. They don't want to answer, is going to have a capacity, traffic capacity of 35% better than what you got. That's kind of answer they're looking for. But to get that answer, you need to understand the traffic situation. You have to understand that what's the solution is going to have an impact on the city. It's a very complicated problem. So what you just said, data collection is important, but using that to model the city and also model the solution into the city and figure out what's going to be the impact out of it, that's actually a very important piece of the equation. I want to also piggyback on the question with the downside. Here's an interesting phenomenon in the smart city. If you install any solution, there's always upside and there's always downside. Give an example. If you install environmental sensors, like air pollution sensors, and you collect the data, and then you want to reduce the concentration of air pollution in the city. So what that means is you sometimes modify the traffic lights so that some traffic can be rerouted somewhere else because you want to reduce some concentration of traffic. Guess what's going to happen? The downside of that is you may actually create traffic jam by doing this artificial rerouting. So whatever solution you bring in the city, an IoT, there's always upside, and there's always either intended or unintended consequences. So you have to understand all that. The only way to understand all these things is by collecting data and use it to analyze what's going to come out of it.
And the thing I would add to that is in the paper I emphasize the importance of open data platforms so that it will facilitate exactly what you're talking about. It's not just about collecting the information, it's making that information available to researchers so they can figure out what's going on and how we can improve the problems.
And yeah, just to build on that, just real quick, the opportunity here, because of the drastic decline in the cost of computing, the decline in the cost of connectivity, is that you can build these systems for very localized communities. So in our context, what we're seeing is the deployment of micro weather stations that then are linked to insurance schemes for small shareholder agriculturalists who basically buy into an insurance scheme, this is in East Africa, when they purchase seed for their crop. Similarly, we're seeing the development of very localized flood monitoring systems that are being deployed to marginalized communities in Central America that aren't getting those services, or flood monitoring or sort of precipitation forecasting. Those services aren't being provided by state or national agencies. So it's the possibility for local communities to take some of these things into their own hands.
This woman here has a question.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much. Just as an aside, I recently saw an article about Kansas and Oklahoma and efforts to use sensors in order to figure out the causes of the earthquakes that are being caused by fracking and the monitoring of water. I don't know if that's something that you all are talking about. But my question is actually looking at the U.S. military as an apparatus that constructs and runs towns all over the country and all over the world and provides emergency services in places like Africa, Haiti, whenever there's an emergency. How do you see them using this technology? Again, not in the bang-bang concept, but in the fact that they run towns, cities, their bases all over the world. And how do you see them using this technology? And is it something that the civilian community can learn from?
I have an example, very shortly. I have an example. There was a U.S. Army project called Aribo. It was an autonomous vehicle project. It was designed to pick up wounded soldiers in the battlefield without putting a driver at risk, again, because you drive over there, that means there's a bullets going around that you may get hurt. That project was tested, and now the first application was commercialized real application. In an elderly care unit, then you want to pick up the elderly patients and go to hospital. It's like autonomous vehicle price. So that's one great example that like U.S. Army or military applications originally developed can also actually help the civilian and the commercial applications.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question right here.
Sophie from DevX. I had a question, you've touched on it a little bit, but what is the business case for some of these IoT things, especially when we're talking about developing country applications? Because obviously international donor finance is never going to be enough to solve these problems.
Mm-hmm. So in the development context, when we think about IoT, it's very much the same as when we think about any other information and communication technology, any other ICT. And so if you think about the mainstreaming of the use of mobile technologies, it's the same with the use of IoT. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to either do one of two things, is to improve efficacy and reach with the same sort of resources, or achieve the same sort of impact with lower resources. And so from the donor community side, there's an opportunity to improve outcomes and get better monitoring and evaluation in the near term. That's from the donor side. There's a whole host of business models for smart communities and national governments to consider, whether it's in the context of any sort of city that's doing some sort of concession around parking, and then there's the business model around that, or the use of smart street lamps for some sort of revenue model if it's around community Wi-Fi or some sort of provision of internet. So it all depends on the perspective, if it's from a donor-driven intervention or if it's from the business model of revenue generation.
Okay, we're out of time, but I want to thank Sokwu, John, and Tim for sharing your thoughts, and we'll look forward to seeing how things unfold. And thank you very much for coming.